Greetings, everybody. It is the 13th of March, the day before Pi Day, 2022. Once again, third decade, 21st century. I've had the opportunity to Zoom with Miss Sheila Kay. If you've been paying attention to my channel, she's been leaving several comments, and we just finally got to the point where maybe it would be better to do a Zoom call. So we did one Zoom call. We got to know each other a little bit, kind of establish what the video would be about and what sort of things to avoid and whatnot. And it was great. It was great to converse with somebody, even if we don't even agree 100% on the subject matter. The one thing we did learn is that from our own individual experiences, there's a great deal of bias that is oftentimes very difficult to overcome. So without further ado, here's the video. I hope you enjoy. You're awesome. Did you hear that?
Yep. It also said that was, I'm not going to say her name because then she'll keep talking to me. That was my speaker, so to
Okay.
speak.
So welcome, Miss Sheila Kay. So we've been conversing quite a bit about this whole thing with Joss Whedon. Fair to say, if you can remove all the negative conversation about him, are you or were you a fan of his content?
Yes, a huge fan of his content to the point of I would work really hard to convince people who are like, that show looks terrible. I will never watch that show because it's so bad. I would be like, if they were a close friend of mine, I would be like, let's just sit down and like watch a couple of episodes, give it a chance. Or maybe I'd have them watch something else. Like, for example, like The Shortest Thing, I would maybe have them watch if like there wasn't some reason that I think they would hate it. Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, because that very short, one small piece that I think sort of wraps up his talent in terms of being able to weave together a story, multifaceted characters, and many other things all in one 45-minute piece.
Plus, it's Neil Patrick
And it's
Harris.
done. And it has Neil Patrick Harris
And
yes,
Felicia Day.
and Felicia Day and Nathan Fillion and a lot of guest appearances from lovely people as well. So it's, you know, that's a fantastic piece of art. And then Firefly would usually be my other segue in, because again, short, caps off with a movie that I feel like, you know, people are very divided on, but at the same time kind of sets people up to understand, if they didn't get it from Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog, that Joss Whedon, sorry for spoilers out there. Is it okay to kind of give spoilers? I mean, I won't say the specific thing, but I'll just say Joss Whedon is willing to kill off people that you love and are very attached to. And more so than a lot of directors who is just like, everybody lives, everybody lives, everybody lives happily ever after. And you know, and so I feel like once I've gotten somebody through Firefly, they're kind of convinced to give a lot of other things a chance. And a lot of people have said, I'm never going to watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I'm never going to watch Angel. I'm never going to watch any of this bullshit. They watch those. They end up loving them. In fact, this woman, 75-year-old woman that comes to my house every week, yes, 75-year-old woman that comes to my house every week. She hated the idea of this. She hates violence. She hates dark fighting scenes. And she also hates long things. Like, she would prefer that if she watches a series, it's like a few episodes and it's over. Like BBC stuff, you know, like 6 episodes, a season's over, or 3 episodes, a season's over kind of stuff. And so going through all of Buffy and all of Angel together, and we were doing them as the seasons kind of segued together, like season 4, season 1, etc. We finished Angel season 5 finale, and the second it ended, I was like, so what did you think? It's like, she wasn't as keen on the finale as I was. Like, I thought it was one of the best finales.
I liked
But
it. I didn't like the show ending, but I did. I thought the finale was. I thought it was a good finale.
I thought it was fantastic. And honestly, like, I go on and on about this, but
Will they or won't they? You know,
Spike's ending, well, just Spike's ending. Well, like, kind of his last day, the thing that he did, like, for his last day, reading poetry, like, I just, like, I had like tears. I was just like, this is so
so
fantastic. Like, that full circle thing of him
it's
being
funny you
William.
mentioned. It's funny you mentioned Angel. So Angel, for some reason, caught my attention. I'll try to avoid getting too deep into things because I tend to fall down rabbit holes. I discovered Angel when I was stationed at the Mountain Warfare Training Center. To put it bluntly, it's quite isolated. It's rather isolated. So there's, unless you're into certain things that involve the mountains, it was very isolating. And I feel like I've repeated myself there. So that's how I discovered Angel. But I wasn't like really all up on Joss Whedon. To me, it was a show. I liked the show. I wasn't really into the creators at the time. I wasn't really that deep yet. At the time, embarrassingly, I was still into wrestling. Um, I wasn't into Buffy at the time, and I think it just might have had to do with my age because it was revolving around teenage drama. Even though everybody in the show was in their 20s and they were my age or older, it wasn't the mindset I was in at the time to enjoy it. I've since then recently watched it and I've enjoyed it. I remember Nathan Fillion from Two Guys, a Girl, and a Pizza Place, and I remember a trailer for Serenity. While I was deployed to Ramadi, I came off a patrol. I watched Serenity and I watched all the special features. Somebody had the DVD. I borrowed it. I watched it. I watched all the special features. And that's when I discovered Firefly. And it wouldn't be until maybe 2 years later when I would PCS to Columbus, Ohio, that I would find Firefly in the bargain bin at a Best Buy. And we would watch it. And watching the special features, I got to learn more and more about Joss Whedon. And then, I figured out who he was. I'm speeding this along, as you can imagine. And then in 2020, when COVID hit, and I don't think I need to say much about that, I got laid off. And as I was looking for jobs, doing odd jobs here and there, my wife and I were like looking for stuff to watch. So we decided to kind of go through a Joss Whedon calendar. We are a Joss Whedon profile, so to speak, or people from that Firefly verse. Like we watched Sarah Connor Chronicles because of Summer Glau. We watched Dollhouse because of Joss Whedon. And we watched a handful of other things because of either the actors or whatnot. And I'm obviously a big, big Firefly fan. I was a big fan of Angel. And then the wife and I just recently watched Buffy, and neither one of us really got that deep, like, oh, the metaphors, oh, the symbolism, oh, this and oh, that. It was just entertaining. We just found it entertaining. We just enjoyed it. You and I have been conversing quite a bit about the controversies, and we can continue that conversation. I guess my question is, regardless of what side you line up on, has it tainted your enjoyment? Has it tainted your opinion of the stuff that he's created?
It has.
Okay.
It has, personally. But I'm still wrestling with it, and like how much, and a bunch of things. Like, I think I'll just kind of give an analogy of like things that have happened in the past, where I just can't watch certain things anymore because of how it's tainted things. Woody Allen, I can't watch his things anymore. And I think a lot of people know, like, at least by now, know the full scandal of Woody Allen. And I sort of have been following it and how things got confused and conflated with like what the scandal actually was versus like what the media was reporting. that it was
Is
like
it
the abuse of his daughter,
Okay.
Dylan, versus Sunyi, right? So a lot of people confused. Like, and I actually thought both were gross. So I was kind of like, well, ugh, you know, but either way, I just was like, it the more I was hearing, the more it just looked bad. And I've worked with children who've been sexually abused and stuff like that. And so it's just, I also do think it makes a difference, like when the person is in things, you know, like Bill Cosby, for example. Like, man, that one was hard to reconcile. Like Bill Cosby, America's Dad, like sort of being like all of the stories
I
that
have
came
some
out
strong
about him.
opinions on that too.
I'm sure you do. And like that one was rough for me, particular because what he did, uh, you know, and what he confessed to doing in a deposition was something that had happened to me. And so that eked me out an awful lot. So I'm like, yeah, I can't watch that. It just, it makes my skin crawl. Now, am I saying that Joss Whedon is a child molester or Bill Cosby? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I'm not saying that it's the exact same thing, but what I'm saying is that for me, as somebody who's had experiences both like personally and as somebody who's just seen prevalent um, victimization in my life and in my work, it's like those kinds of things get really difficult for me, in how I'm able to enjoy things, having in the back of my mind that somebody who did really awful things is profiting from my enjoyment of this thing.
I see what you're saying. Um, you and I had a chance to talk previously to get to know each other a little bit and also kind of maybe establish some areas to stay away from and whatnot. And that was great. And I really appreciated having the opportunity to talk to you and get to know you. And we also established some of our backgrounds so that we don't have to go through it all over again and keep the
Sure.
conversation flowing. Um, Granted, for the majority of my adult life, I was in the military, but I was in a very segregated portion of the military where I was in the infantry. And when I retired, we were still segregated as far as male and female. In the last several years I was in, I think former President Obama repealed the "Don't Ask, Don't Tell," and we could have that discussion at a later time. But that was really about it. And you know, to be honest, the homosexuality thing was like, look, I don't care if you can do your job. Just forgive me if I find certain things uncomfortable. Like I think most people find public displays of affection uncomfortable, depending on how much is on display.
It depends on what they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But I
Um,
mean, I think that it's the idea of would the equivalent of what a heterosexual couple is doing make you uncomfortable, like then that's where.
and then me being a hetero, there's probably certain things that I might just be like, well, that's a little weird. But the point being is, I say all that because I didn't have a tremendous amount of experience with females in the workforce due to my military experience.
Mhm.
Um, that being said, yes, I saw various different things. People hiding behind their rank and bullying people with their rank, people hiding behind their authority and bullying people with their authority, people going through different stages in their life where it's that roller coaster. You know, you have your highs and your lows. And I'm well aware that there's opportunities for growth and that you can live and make mistakes. And some people have the fortune, the fortune of watching other people make mistakes and not repeating those mistakes. And then some people make their own mistakes. And with all these things I've absorbed, I find myself asking questions like, okay, well, was Josh going through something? Was his accusers going through something? Were there a lot of mitigating factors? Is there multiple sides to the story? And you and I have had this
Can I
discussion.
pause right there? Because like what you just said, like, so the last time we spoke,
Mhm.
and then at the beginning of this video, it was the first time that I heard you use the word victims at all.
Okay.
Ever. Like when you were referring to anything, like of like somebody who's accused of something,
Right.
or a potential bully or a potential whatever, right? Versus like using the word victim. Like I'm going to take the perspective of a victim. But just now, when you talk about Joss Whedon, every time you've talked about Joss Whedon, and this is something that I sort of have tried to bring up several times, you always say versus his accusers, rather than like
Okay.
victims or potential victims or whatever. So like whenever it's about Joss Whedon, at least, just a pattern I've noticed is that they're never even potential victims. They're always just accusers.
I try to watch my words very carefully because every individual places different values on different words. You
Sure.
can replace the word with a thesaurus, but certain people put different values on different words. And what I find, and don't take this personally, what I find very difficult in modern conversation is if somebody has a heavier emotion attached to a certain word, and whether that causes them to express that emotion and then it deflects the conversation and then it derails the conversation and the conversation is no longer on point. I don't know that I meant to use victim. Sometimes I try to keep momentum, and it doesn't afford me the same opportunity to think about my word choice as carefully. The point that I was trying to make was that there's certain perspectives I have and there's certain perspectives I don't have. And I've also been trying to battle inside my head. Am I fighting a certain amount of bias? Because I do enjoy the content.
Hmm.
I've seen people accuse for selfish reasons. I've seen people accuse for legitimate reasons. I've seen people accuse because they're taking something small, they're conflating it, they're embellishing it, and they're not thinking about the domino effect, and they just want some instant gratification. I've seen a lot of these different things. I've also seen the impacts, the good, the bad. I've seen the impacts where I don't think it was enough. Based on the accusations, I don't think the results were enough. I've seen the impacts were too much. I've seen it all, and I think there's one question that neither one of us had a chance to really answer, and it's like, what is the goal? So you have all these people talking negatively. You have whether it's accusations, whether it's people jumping on said accusations, and then maybe you have people. Maybe I don't know. I haven't really seen a whole lot of people supporting him. It seems like whatever's getting published is everybody against him, which kind of creates that smoke and fire thing that I think you were talking about, or maybe that was somebody else.
I mean, kind of like that's been one of my positions. It's like if they're all saying it, and this isn't the important thing to bring up is this isn't a court of law. Like, and I haven't heard you make this argument, which I would say is a logical fallacy argument. It's not a court of law. He's not going to jail for anything. It's nothing like that. Like, but a lot of people will make the argument, oh, they're innocent until proven guilty. And it's like, well, no, that is for a court of law when somebody's being accused of a crime. This is like more of an idea of preponderance of evidence type of thing. Versus, you know what I mean? Like this is like, is it more likely to be true? than
Right.
less likely to be true. And like when you have so many people sort of like backing up, like on the side of that it's likely to be true, and then you add on his own words, behavior, whatever, when he gets his chance to I can't even use the word defend himself because he really didn't defend himself. And
That was the
I
one
mean,
conversation we should have
he,
recorded, is when we talked about that god awful Vulture article.
we can talk about it again. I mean, I think that it's worth talking about. It was an awful article in many ways, but I think it was, it was the one time where it was using Joss's own words,
And they were not
quoting
good.
him. Right. And so like that's where it's like, all right, I'm taking this whole picture. And that was the thing where it, like, as much as I want to like love his stuff, I mean, and as somebody who has been victimized by abuses of power and stuff like that, I know that there are always situational things, blah, blah, blah. When he said the shit he said about like, oh, she just didn't understand English, and all the screwed up things that he said and excuses and whatever, I was just like, holy crap.
We probably attack this at different angles, and I hate to say it, we'd probably arrive at the same conclusion. I may be attempting to advocate for the accused, in this case being Joss Whedon, and I freely admit the fact that at the end of the day, I could advocate all day long, but if this was hypothetically some self-induced court that you and I made up, some kangaroo court that you and I created, we could
I don't even think a kangaroo court. I think if he was involved in a lawsuit and you put him on the stand to defend himself, a jury would go back and be like, we're awarding all these people a bunch of money 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100 maybe.
If he conducts himself the way he did with that reporter from Vulture, all melancholy and I don't know, under the influence of something, what, I don't know. But
maybe he wasn't though. Maybe he wasn't under the influence of anything. Maybe that was just because, he freely admitted to her that his publicist told him to get up and go to the bathroom whenever he gets a hard question that he just doesn't have an answer for. And he did that a bunch of times. And so like it could have had nothing to do with, you know what I mean? Like he could be in his total right mind and still behave that way. That's also a possibility.
So agree or disagree.
And I mean, I think if you're over empathizing with him, you want to find like some excuse for him having such a bad defense, right? Like, but the truth could be somewhere in between where he just doesn't have a good excuse for what he did.
Oh, and sorry, I don't know why everybody's blowing me up, although my mom's supposedly coming home from the hospital. Sorry.
Well, that could be important.
Well, she's coming home for hospice, but God,
your life is a shit show.
Oh yeah, it's a shit show. I have no problem for being his advocate while at the same time freely admitting that I've done my best, but at the end of the day, you're a turd. You're a piece of shit. I'm also relying heavily on my experiences, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. I've witnessed people abuse their power. I've had people abuse their power on me. I've had people hold their position and authority over me and conduct themselves inappropriately. Maybe I'm just built differently than others. I just, okay, you're a piece of shit, and I'm just going to go on with my life, and I'm not going to allow you to affect my life. I've got a beautiful wife who's much prettier than I deserve. I got my kids, I got my house. You're just a piece of shit, and this is the only realm you have any kind of influence over, and it's only going to be for a temporary amount of time. That's me. I'm not saying that's everybody. Some people take things a little bit differently. Some people, they're impacted differently, but I rely on my experiences, and I also know what it's like to be in charge. I also know what it's like to be accountable for being in charge, and I also know what it's like to not be in charge and to undermine the people in charge because you don't like them or you disagree with their decisions. And it's funny, you don't realize what that's like until finally the shoe's on the other foot and you are in charge, and there's a whole lot of stress, and there's a whole lot of responsibility, and there's deadlines, and there's this, that, and the other, and everybody else underneath you doesn't want to pull their weight, but yet all they want to do is criticize and blame and, talk about how bad you are, when at the end of the day, it's not their butt on the line. And those are the kinds of experiences I'm pulling from to question, okay, well, at one point, Joss had 3 shows on the air. He had Buffy, he had Angel, he had Firefly. I imagine that's stressful. Again, not condoning his behavior, but I imagine that's stressful. I imagine, there could have been some stress. There could have been any number of things that could have impacted his behavior. I know what it's like to not be so popular. I know what it's like to not have girls interested in you or be stuck in the friend zone. I'm not condoning him cheating on his wife if he was married. Once you cross a threshold and you're married, that changes the dynamic. All right. You might look at what's on the menu, but eat at home.
Yeah. And here's where, like, you and I, like, I believe, I think generally what happens between 2 consenting adults is between them. And I think more of the issue are the things that impacted them outside of that, right? Like, so for instance, with his wife, like, when she talks about what happened with her marriage, she talks about her being a strong feminist, him co-opting a lot of her work to become a known feminist, and then hypocritically, like, leveraging some of those things to cheat on her and do those things. So it wasn't about the cheating, like the cheating is the least of the issues with it, right? Like, it was like about the hypocritically, like, doing these things and abusing his power and doing all of these things, and kind of like how he hypocritically, like, portrayed himself as a feminist, and she felt in her mind like suppressed her work while leveraging it for himself and elevating himself. And then if you pull in all of those younger women that were involved who were trying to get their careers up and running, then it's like, well, did they even really have a choice when the boss, whether married or not, but married in this instance, is like, kind of like, there's a wink, wink, nod, nod back then of, if you fuck me, you'll get this part, but if you don't, you won't get any parts. And I'm controlling shows all over the place. Do you really want to get on my bad side?
And I've got nothing for that.
Well, who can? It's not a defensible thing to do. And, and just to say, from my background, I've been in power as well for things. And I, once in a while, have had both males and females, and, and even trans people have like expressed some kind of crush on me or something. And I'm like, never. I am just like, I'm not even gonna come close to breaching that, even if they're the ones pursuing me, because of how problematic that is when I have leverage over them, when I could be evaluating them for their progress in the future or things like that. Like, there's too much power dynamic in it. So even if like, from any perspective, it seems like they're the ones pursuing me, in my mind, I'm like, no, it's not even an option. And so if he's the one doing the pursuing, then it's even worse, right? And so for me, it's just like, no, like that was just something I always just shut down. Like I didn't even think about trying to date somebody who was under me in terms of power structure. And more than that, you know, I've also like seen things from the other abuse perspective. And when you were talking about your perspective of experiencing that, you were like, yeah, I experienced it, I saw it, but I was like, at the end of the day, I was like, well, you don't have this, that, the other over me. But sometimes when I've been in abusive dynamics, I've literally been edged out of my jobs totally, or lost positions in abusive situations. And it impacts my career. It impacts my ability to do work. I lost my access to like a huge, I was working on this huge project and I lost my access because of this abusive dynamic once. And it made it so that essentially it stopped, it halted all my progress, ground everything to a start, and then affected my whole future of my career. And so we look at it differently because I'm like, no, it's not as simple as you just say no big deal and move on. Sometimes the impacts can be far more than just your own attitude about it. They can be real world. They can be like, and for actresses, we're working under Joss Whedon. Like, I mean, I think Charisma Carpenter getting fired, for example, that's a real world implication. You know, I'm not saying she's entitled to a job either, but if you get fired because you disagree with your abusive boss that wants you to abort your baby, you know, for example, like, well, let's just argue from the standpoint for a second that the story is true, and then you get fired for it.
That could,
it's
that's
like,
really
well, that's a
argument.
real
Yeah.
world ramification.
And I'd like to think we don't really have any stock in this other than we're just communicating, because you're right. If we both assume it's true, you know, that would be my only argument, is I would have to counteract and be like, well, what if it's not true? After that,
Right.
there's no real argument other than either she's not telling the whole truth, or like you and I noticed, I heard something different when we had our previous conversation. You know, if that happened to me, it can happen to other people. I think you and I are both arguing to a degree about nuance.
Yes.
Maybe you feel it differently, but because yes, there were circumstances where the things had a bigger impact than just I made it out to be. Sometimes, you know, sometimes in the moment I'm really inflamed. Sometimes when I have a moment to think about it, I brush it off. Most of the time I brush it off, but it's like you said, you know, when we were getting to know each other earlier, I told you about one of my experiences where on the flip side, I was accused.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there and I'm wondering, well, what is your end state? What is your checkmate? What is your final chess move? Because what were you trying to get out of this? Were you just trying to not work with me? Were you just trying to, because it didn't impact my career, as I was freshly out of the military. I didn't really have a career, but it had a tremendously adverse impact on me at a horrific time in my life. And unfortunately, yes, I tend to feel a bit strongly when I see people making accusations, because we just unfortunately are living at a time when it's more favorable. And I forgive me, I'm not trying to use words that maybe you have a very emotional attachment to, but whether it's a social trend, whether it's a trend, whatever the case may be, it seems as though we're living in a time when to be the accuser and to, now watch out for this word, to potentially put yourself in the victim status has a great amount of social currency. And you don't see anybody hardly defending the accused. You very rarely, if ever, see anybody defending the accused. Where you and I got involved is I was just asking questions, is it really like that? This is the trend.
Well,
are these
but what
really
I will say, what I will say is sometimes you do see people defending people who are accused. You know, like for example, James Gunn. You know, I don't know how much you know about
J.
James
August
Gunn.
Richards. Oh, no,
No,
James
no.
Gunn. I got you.
James Gunn, the guy did Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
Like he had some really like he had, let's just say he used to have like pretty unsavory humor. I'm not going to repeat any of the things that he said because I don't want clips out there of me saying those things. But they were tasteless. They were essentially lowbrow, tasteless humor
Yeah,
on
National
whatever
Lampoon
Twitter,
style stuff.
social media types of whatever, and stuff that was like racist and bigoted and whatever. But the thing with James Gunn, like when he got targeted, like he had already become aware that that was kind of a crappy thing to do. And he had already said, like, I'm taking this stuff down. And, I'm really sorry that I behaved kind of like a dick. Like this is, this isn't like really like at the time that I said and did these things, I thought it was funny. And now I kind of realize the impact that it could have. And that's what he initially said. I mean, that's what he said years ago. And then much later, like, people see this sort of movement, and then it's like, well, let's find some person we can target that we perceive as like a liberal Hollywood, kind of person. And it was actually a bunch of trolls who sort of like targeted him and like tried to do this cancel thing for him. And it temporarily suspended his involvement. But a lot of people came out and said, you know what? No, like this guy made a mistake when he was young. He owned up to it.
Right.
He apologized for it a long time ago. And, like, this isn't what this stuff is about. Like, we don't want him removed from Guardians of the Galaxy. He's an amazing director. He's doing great work. He's doing great things. And all these people came out to defend him. And he got, it all worked out, and so while yes, I agree with you that on the side that, and this is how I would say it rather like differently than how you say it, I would say for the first time in history, being a victim isn't always terrifying, shameful, and cause to be targeted for more abuse.
Well, you have a heavier background in it than I do. That's unfair.
I do, but I'm saying
I only
like
know that because we got to know each other.
That's how different our perspectives are in terms of it. Like you see it as a bandwagon thing, and I see it as for the first time, it's safe to speak up without such massive backlash that just by artifact of speaking up, it's ending your career. For example, when Rose McGowan, like people weren't ready yet. When Rose McGowan first spoke up against Harvey Weinstein, even though she won a lawsuit against him, she essentially got blackballed from Hollywood because people were not ready to speak up yet. And now it's like she's been blacklisted from Hollywood for so long.
It's the common thing to do.
She's like it happened for so long, like over 20 years. Like her career essentially ended in the early 2000s when she came out and said that he raped her.
Well, not to necessarily change the subject, but to kind of, if I can, try to redirect it a little bit based on something we had brought up earlier. And it's basically in the vein of where do we go from here? Because remove some of these
song, where do we go from here?
I still enjoy the content. I still, after having just watched it, I enjoy Buffy. If for no other reason, I enjoy the nostalgia, the late '90s, the early 2000s. I enjoy being attracted to the people on screen and not feeling like a dirty old man because they're either my age or older. Conversely, I love Angel. Big fan of Firefly. Dollhouse was cool. Dr. Horrible sing-along blog was great. I'm not, I don't want to necessarily go down a laundry list, but as far as the three major ones go, these are things that to me are kind of like timeless cult classics that I still enjoy. And I understand it may not have been pretty. It may have been messy. There may have been backstage drama. Not everybody may have gotten along. There may have been adverse personalities. I still choose to enjoy it. And I think I'm going to take on the position that, you know what, stuff happens. It's an unfortunate thing, but it happens. I'm still going to enjoy it. Separately from that, you're right. Charisma Carpenter's gorgeous. I loved Cordelia. I loved her even more on Angel. Wish I would see her in more stuff. Wish her career would have gone in a different direction. Not sure what happened to Sarah Michelle Gellar, unless those are personal choices due to raising a family. Because like you look at David Boreanaz, Bones didn't necessarily have to be what it is today. It could have flopped, but
Right.
It thrived, and now he's David Boreanaz. Nathan Fillion, Castle could have flopped, and he could have still been Captain Mal. But now he's Richard Castle, and now he's John Nolan on The Rookie. He's Nathan Fillion. I think I lost my train of thought there. I think I'm going to take the choice to enjoy the content, because I think we can get bogged down in the quagmire. Sometimes backstories are fun, but then I don't want to say I want to ignore it, but I think for the sake of everybody involved, a lot of people put a lot of work into that project. The actors, the crew. Maybe Josh wasn't a great person. Well, there's been no real good defense. So as of right now, what's been put out there doesn't make him look like a good person at all. I guess the real question is, could he still continue to create good content? And I guess I'll put it more bluntly. If they decide to reboot Firefly, should he be involved?
I mean, I don't know how I feel about reboot. Like, sometimes reboots exhaust me. So
You see, I figured that one would spawn a different conversation, because yes, could they recapture the same magic? Would it be the same, or would it be just a reboot to reboot it and it's not the same at all? It's not good, recasting it, going in a different direction. Have you followed the comics?
some of it. I mean, I know some of the basics of where the comics went. I haven't bought and read all of them. I've gotten a few of them as gifts. I haven't read them.
I have the original 4 graphic novels that basically pick up the story. A Shepherd's Tale basically is all about Shepherd Book's backstory.
That one I got as a gift and read. Yeah.
Okay. And then there's 3 additional novels that basically pick up the story after Serenity. So basically, if there's essentially no blank spot between Firefly and Serenity, then these books pick up the story. And then a new storyteller, graphic artist, I apologize for not knowing. Boom Comics picked it back up. There's The Unification War, which is 3 books. There's Blue Sun Rising, which is 2 books. There's 2 new series coming out, one of which is a new verse. It's a totally different cast and crew. It's all graphic. It's all in graphic novel form. I haven't picked that one up yet, but there's 2 new storylines coming out. I haven't gotten them yet. I don't know what they're about. There's been books written. I don't know if those books are approved as canon. And I told you we could have fun nerding out about this.
Sure.
Getting back to the original question, if he is a master creator and a master storyteller and a mastermind of great content, is he effectively done as it stands right now? Or in your opinion, does there have to be something that takes place before he can get back in the game?
think, all right. So I have, what I will say is I have a extensive background in mental health. Extensive. Just
which we have established.
And
Sorry,
the
my cat's
stuff,
trying to get
like
involved.
both the stuff that people have said that he's done and the way that he presented in the interview, those are not like simple, like, oh, you get prescribed a pill or you stop. Like, they're not small intervention things, you know, like where there's just like one problematic small area of thinking. Like, he has lifelong problematic things that are more telltale, and I can't diagnose somebody, right? Like, I would never diagnose somebody based on that meaning, but I'm just saying, I'm just gonna say, like, he has some real telltale signifiers of something that would be more in what they would call the cluster A disorders, like the personality disorders, that are like lifelong things that usually take years, if not decades, of work.
Okay.
If you even want to work on them. A lot of people who have them don't, you know, like, they're like, I'm fine. I don't need to change. The world needs to revolve around me, kind of things. You know what I mean? Like, especially the type of stuff he projects. Like, he thinks he's entitled for all these women to fuck him the way that he talks. Like, he has to, he's compelled to, and like, he doesn't even see them as people, really, like, in the way he talks about them. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
they're more like game pieces to him, or conquest. Yeah, exactly. It's just, but the more important part of it is that they're satellites in his life. He's the center of the universe, and they're just not human beings. And like, unless you're the type of person who can look at another person across from you, like the way we're talking right now, and see that they're a human being with their own perspective, their lived experience, and empathize with that they have their own lived experience and it could be different and stuff like that, and that it matters. Most of all, that it matters, you know, and that they're a valid human being, moreover than just what they can do for you, or, you know, like that they shouldn't exist in your world if they're not important to you, and they should be a plaything to you if they do, kind of a thing, or whatever, right? And like, if somebody like, the level of intervention that it would take to change that type of thinking, right, would be like, I can't imagine him changing it before he was too old to come back and create content.
So the short answer would be no.
If he wanted to.
I got
you know what I mean? Like, if he wanted to get the help.
Yeah.
But he doesn't right now. He doesn't even see it as a problem. The way he gave those answers, he did not indicate that he saw anything that he did as a real problem.
So, to kind of, for anybody who's watching this, whether you're new or you've been on the channel for a while, you and I have been having some discussions back and forth. Well, I would respond to you in a video, and since we took the time to get to know each other a little bit, not that I want to give anything away, but between your academic, your professional, and your personal experiences, you're seeing certain things that I'm not. So without having your experiences, some of what I'm seeing, whether it's knee-jerk, whether it's first responsive, whatever the case may be, is I'm seeing the potential for the bandwagon. I'm seeing the potential for modern social trends. I'm seeing all these things, whether it has anything to do with my experience, recent, old experiences. And that's how we've been coming at this. And I'll admit, I've heard and learned a lot, because I'm well aware that there's other things to see, there's other things to hear, there's more perspectives. And you haven't turned any of them down that I've proposed. You haven't shot anything down that I've proposed, but you've also leaned very heavily on your experience to where I think I don't know if it was you or somebody else who said, usually where there's smoke, there's fire. And the only thing we have to go off of is that Vulture article, and that doesn't help his cause. The one time he had an opportunity to articulate his point of view, his perspective, and potentially either apologize or deny or defend, he really didn't do either. He just, I don't know, he was like aloof. He was flippant.
Exactly.
And
but I think that's because I think he, consistent with like both what other people have said about their treatment from him and what's been reported by other sources of people who are still too afraid to come forward and say things, and like just like story, you know what I mean, like all kinds of things, like it's all this consistent pattern. Like he doesn't think it's wrong.
Well, there's something I want you to address now that we're recording this. I heard something, sorry.
Like if you don't think what you're doing is wrong, there's no reason to defend yourself.
I got you. Do you remember when I said something about what I heard Charisma Carpenter say was, let me say this and don't question it? I'm paraphrasing the hell out of that.
Yeah.
But what I heard was, I'm going to say this and I don't want anybody to question it. I'm going to basically make these remarks that are defamating and slanderous, and I don't want anybody to question it. Just let me say it. That's apparently what I had heard. And go ahead.
Yeah, and so I've rewatched the video because I was like, I don't remember her saying that. And then I watched it, and I'll paraphrase what I heard.
Okay.
When she said it was, I put it out there. I was so terrified. I remember her using the words, I was terrified, because they had used the word shit the bed a few times, like don't shit the bed. And that's a common phrase that people use in entertainment, like shitting the bed is screwing something up. And she was like, I was terrified, and like I wanted to put this out, and I spent so much time thinking about what I was going to say, how I was going to say it, being really careful about what I did say and didn't say, and all of those kinds of things. And she's like, I spent so much time editing and re-editing and re-editing and re-editing, being so careful with what words I used. And like, and then I put it out there, and then I was like, God, did you just shit the bed? And then she's like, and I meant metaphorically and literally, like, was I gonna shit the bed? Because I was so terrified. Like, she was so terrified of what kind of backlash, because she talked about then alienating, like she said, almost all of her income now comes from Comic-Con and stuff like that, like conventions and cons and, you know, whatever. And that she was like, okay, and these people love Joss. They're going to hate me now. I'm going to lose everything by putting this statement out. And then I was sort of like shocked. And then I started getting all of these media requests, and I got bombarded with all of them, of all these people who wanted to interview me. And I was just like they were interested in interviewing her, because it was like, then other people were putting out statements, right? That was, and she said she was shocked by that.
The Me Too
and she was
movement.
like, and then I didn't want to do an interview because I didn't feel like doing a pile on tour for Joss Whedon. I felt like I had already said everything.
Yeah.
I had been so careful about the statement that I put out. I had already said everything I was going to say, so I didn't see the value in going out to do an interview just to pile on more.
I remember hearing all that and thinking very highly of that. And I thought very highly of her for that, because, you know, she acknowledges, as a result of being Cordelia Chase, the majority of her income comes from these conventions where it's because of the Whedon verse, so to speak, and she didn't want to alienate her fans who may also be fans of Whedon. And I applaud her for that. I swear to God, I heard something towards the end as they were talking about that one thing, where she said something to the effect of, I'm saying it, I'm putting it out there, or I can't remember. It was something to the effect of, if somebody's doing that, let them say it and leave them alone and don't question it.
Yeah, I never heard those words, and
I think
if
maybe we
you
both
find
need to
them, I'll
go.
listen, you know, like,
Maybe we
but I
both need
just
to.
was like, I listened to it twice, you know, I listened to
Yeah.
it both like when it had first come out, listen to her words, and then I went and re-listened to it after your video, because I was like, did she really say that? Like, that doesn't sound like what I remember, but I'm like, maybe I'm misremembering it. So I went back and listened to it, and I listened to it again pretty carefully, especially when I got to that part, because I knew they were talking about it a lot, and I listened to it pretty intently, and I was just like, where did he hear her say this? And then that was, I messaged you and I said, could you redirect me if there's a different video if I listen to the wrong one? Because
I'll have to rewatch it because I want to say they were on the same topic, and she said something to that effect where I was like, yes, 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 no. And I remember that distinctly, and I remember why I felt that, but I'm gonna have to rewatch it because I'm almost positive it was in the same vein. And I don't know if she was referring to the exact same thing, but what I got out of it was, and I'm paraphrasing this, and I'm making this very generic so that maybe we could have this to talk about for a moment. If somebody makes an accusation, it's their truth, it's how they feel. Let them say their piece and leave them alone. Don't question them on that. And the only problem I had with that is if you're going after someone specifically by name, and what you're saying is potentially slanderous, defamating, and potentially liable, then why can't anybody ask a question? And I could be wrong. She may not have said that. She may not have said anything close to that. Due to some of the head trauma I suffered in the military, I that may be one of those times where I just didn't hear what I heard, or I didn't interpret what I heard correctly. I think it's just safe to leave it at that. But the impression I walked away with was she was basically saying people in the position of making accusations should be allowed to make their accusations without being questioned. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that.
I mean, I didn't hear her say that, so I don't want to like argue about it or like try and defend saying that. If
Take her out of the equation. Take her out of the equation. Just people in
take
general.
her out of the equation, and like, if that's the argument, well, for one, I don't think that's the argument, you know. Well, and also when you brought it up in the video, you didn't just say that, you also said, and the accused doesn't get to defend himself. And I'm like, well, that statement wouldn't say that the accused doesn't get to defend themselves. It would be saying like, okay, like if somebody just speaks up and says something like, this really bad thing happened to me, and I'm going to say, like, from my perspective, that it happened to me, but I'm not suing them, I'm not pressing charges, I'm just saying, like, this is what happened to me.
Framing the context.
Right.
I'm making a statement. I want to get this off my chest. It'll feel better if I get it off my chest, but I just want to let it go.
Right.
I get that. I'm cool with that.
So then the other person can say whatever the fuck they want to.
Yeah,
you know, and I get, like, I mean, that person's a liar, that person's, you know, whatever, like, you know, people can say whatever they want. I guess I don't know what else to say other than that. It's like I think that some things can happen, right? And there's only two people, and two people can see it very differently, right? Like, I think that one person can be like, you know, can make some comments that they had great intentions from their standpoint that aren't maybe sensitive, but also from their standpoint aren't being insensitive. Like they're like not even thinking about it because they're just like, they don't, it's not something that they think about or anything. And the other person could be like, man, that terrified me when they said that, or man, that it felt like a threat, or it felt like a subtle, and it could be due to their previous experiences with things, because when other people said it, they meant something different when they said, you know what I mean? Because there
I
is
do.
in
Body language, facial
in body
expression.
language, and yeah, in all kinds of things. And very often, especially in a lot of parts of the United States, people are passive aggressive and they don't say what they mean and mean what they say, right? And sarcasm can be very prevalent, and other things, like there are a lot of things that people can say. And sometimes even people saying something like, prefacing things like, well, I'm not saying that you're the biggest asshole I ever met. I'm just saying blah, 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 what. But by saying that preface, it's like, well, why did you say that?
Yeah, my general impression is this. With our combined experiences, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this without using too heavy words or too light of words. I feel as though on this particular topic, with your experiences, professional, academic, personal, you have a very powerful feeling. I don't want to say bias, but I don't know of a better word, towards the accused, where equally and opposite, due to my experiences, I'm feeling a heavy sense of advocating for the accused, and you're I think I said that backwards, but you know what I'm trying to say. And
I would call them victims, not accusers.
Well, I wonder I wonder if because of our experiences, we're so overwhelmed that it can oftentimes be very difficult. And I feel like you and I have tried really, really hard to be rational and objective, and I think we've done a pretty good job. But I still can't help but wonder if our own experiences just keep getting in the way.
Well, no, just let me preface it with this. It's like, I do have a bias. Absolutely. Every human being has a bias. We're all shaped and colored by our experiences, our backgrounds, our, like our worldview. How do we perceive and think about the world? If I had grown up in, like, say, for example, an ultra conservative, powerful family, and I mean small c conservative, not necessarily, you know what I mean, like political, but where like I was just sheltered and I never experienced anything, and I was entitled to everything and given everything, and I was like, from the start of my life, I was always given every advantage, always put in positions of power, et cetera, et cetera. It's possible I could have gone through my whole life never having an experience, and I could just be like, yeah, no, like things like that hardly ever happen, but just for me, like, I've been in positions of power, I've been in positions with less power, and when I talk to women around me, even in areas of power, a lot of women experience issues with these types of gender dynamics, power dynamics, even like micro things that I think people in their heads are still trying to grapple with today. But even things that for me, when I was young, I dismissed personally myself as like, well, no, I'm not even going to complain about it. I'm not even going to say anything. I mean, not consciously, but subconsciously. I'm not even going to say anything because it's not real. If I don't complain about it, it's not real. I won't make it real. And so, like, just as an example, like very commonly where I live, there's a heavy drinking culture, really heavy drinking culture. And like, and there's a lot of
the
binge
Foods That Built
drinking.
America and the story about the Milwaukee beer.
Yeah. So the drinking culture here, heavy, heavy. And it's it has been traditionally very prevalent for guys to walk up and just put their hands on women. Sometimes, you know, just their arms, their shoulders, whatever, but very often around their waist, stomachs, very uncomfortable place to be touched if you don't want to be touched, inner thighs, butts, you know, or even worse. And it's been until very recently socially accepted as most bars that if you're a woman and you don't want to be touched inappropriately, don't come out and drink. Has been kind of like the psychology in the culture until like the last several years, I would say, or prior to, yeah, I would say prior to like maybe whenever the Me Too movement started or whatever. And after a while though, like my mindset changed, and I noticed a lot of other women's mindsets started changing of, well, like, no, like if I was in a workplace, somebody would get fired for doing that, or the cops would be called. Like you can't just come up and stick your hand between my thighs. You know, like that's not okay. And but the thing was is that prior to that reckoning, kind of that moment and those things happening, women let these things happen. They never called the cops because they knew the cops would laugh them off the phones when guys were doing these things. And even oftentimes they wouldn't have the bouncers or the bartenders or whoever was in charge kick these guys out because it was so prevalent. It was like part of the culture. And then it started happening more and more. And then eventually places around here have started posting rules of consent. Like you will get kicked out if you don't ask permission, you know.
I don't have much of an argument to that because the assumption would be that there's something I agree with. And I don't, because I can see how that kind of stuff plays into how you absorb and you interpret information, especially with everything talking about Joss Whedon.
But
yeah,
but prior to like my mind change on that, I didn't sit around thinking to myself, oh, I've been sexually assaulted 5,000 times. You know, I wasn't sitting around thinking I'm a victim, even though technically by the definitions of what sexual assault is, I was kind of, you know, and there's no guys for me to even name. These are all strangers. You know what I mean? So I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just saying,
no,
like,
I got you.
This happened. And I think like anyone who's been out at these drunken things prior to the Me Too movement knows that there are places, a lot of places where these things happen.
My biggest contention is, let's say someone like you has some legitimate experiences and you want to make changes for good. Your change becomes a movement. The movement picks up in popularity. What I've noticed through my own personal observations is this is America. We don't do anything appropriately. We do everything full retard. All right. You live in an area where you get snow and ice, and you know what to do when the car loses traction, and you know what not to do when the car loses traction. My point of contention is people.
I'm actually amazing at that, by the way, and I drive a stick shift. So
I'm not saying it's you, but I'm saying there are people out there who look at it as a bandwagon and they want to jump on the bandwagon, and they do what I call false flagging. You know, they go, and because they're jumping on the bandwagon due to the fact that everything's hypersensitive and there's going to be an overcorrection, everything goes full retard. Versus, you know, initially it's like, hey, look, can we establish some ground rules so that if somebody's acting like an ass, we can remove that person from the premises so that the rest of us can enjoy our time and have a good time and remove the assholes. And then what happens is it goes full retard, and it's like, hey, excuse me. Oh my God. And all the guy was trying to do was get to the bar to order a drink. He's like tapping you on the shoulder. Excuse me. I'm not saying that's you. I'm saying that's the unfortunate consequence of what happens in America is you take this legit idea and this legit concept, you put it forward, somehow it catches fire and it becomes super, super popular, and then it devolves into something so stupid as, excuse me, can I just, oh my God, then 5 bounces are coming over, beating on the guy. And all
Yeah,
he wanted to do,
but what I will say is I've literally never seen that happen. Have you?
yes.
You have.
Yeah.
How many times?
Quite a few. Let's put it this way.
Okay, proportionally, how many times have you seen that compared to
That
a
exact
guy
example,
getting drunk
that exact
and
example,
putting their hand in a woman's thigh, on her butt, on her breast, around her midsection?
what you're talking about, I've hardly ever seen, maybe because of who I choose to hang around with and the people I choose to be in a circle with, the people I choose to interact with. I've hardly ever seen that. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm not saying I haven't seen it in my almost 46 years. At various places I've been to, I've seen the consequences of overcorrection. I've seen the consequences of going full retard. You'd be surprised, for being a southern state, North Carolina, the greater Raleigh area is very.
Well, you said that you're near Chapel Hill.
Not anymore. Right? I live on the coast. I live outside of I live in a military town, which is the closest thing would be a college town as far as the conduct and behavior.
So college towns tend to be a little bit more.
Well, due to the age of the people here, it's like being in a college town.
Sure.
Because they're from all over the place and none of them can drive for anything. When I lived in the greater Raleigh area, I'm not trying to go out of my way to offend you if any of this does, but the greater Raleigh area is full woke. SJW on steroids.
I know some people from there, so I kind of know the area a little bit.
Yeah,
I've been there before.
It's full woke. Like, and I don't know if it's
but I also know that Chapel Hill's more liberal than
Chapel Hill's Chapel Hill. Yeah, like the greater Raleigh area, I mean, like, it's like full of people with like white shame and white guilt and like waving Black Lives Matter flags and Antifa flags. And I mean, it's just not my cup of tea. If it's your thing, you do you. I'm not here to criticize. It was just, I've seen the effects of going full retard where, I use the snow analogy. You don't slam on the brakes. You don't steer into this, you don't oversteer and overcorrect. You make slow, modest corrections.
I think that it depends on what the issue is. And if the issue is incredibly serious, incredibly severe, sometimes you need to slam on the brakes, right? Like if you're coming up to like not in the snow, but in a 80 car pileup, you gotta slam on the brakes, right? Or a tanker with gasoline that's like, hey, slam on the brakes as fast as you can and really try to stop before you hit that thing. And
I'm not dissecting the semantics here. I'm just saying that's also been how I approach things too.
I'm saying it depends on how severe it is. Like if it's a minor thing that needs to be corrected, okay, take some time, debate, figure out how best to do it. Like, okay, we've got this issue. Okay, like for example, like, okay, we have an issue with opiates and the consequences of it are really, really bad. But there is some nuance to it that a lot of people don't realize. There are people in really serious chronic pain who've tried many, many other things, and opiates are the only thing literally keeping them alive or functional,
My perspective is the people who really need it are being treated equal to the tweakers. No, I actually have a legitimate condition. I physically need it. No, you're a tweaker. And that's that whole full retard thing.
That's an overcorrection. Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like opiates, that one could use a little bit more nuance, and it's gotten bananas, which is especially, the sad part of it is that a lot of the major problems with opiate overdose deaths are illegal fentanyl, not legal fentanyl, not legal prescriptions that people are getting from the doctor. It's fentanyl coming from another country that's being sprinkled into things of all illegal, illicit drugs. So banning doctor prescriptions is not fixing any of it.
I would be more than happy to have that discussion with you at a separate time.
But so I think we kind of agree on that, right? Like
Oh yeah,
that
yeah,
it's a wicked, but what I'm saying is like when the thing is abuse, this is why I say like you're like, okay, I kind of want to be like not engage and like be like, okay, I'll play devil's advocate, or I'll do, you know, like you've said, like a few different things at different times, or, you know, I want to think about the accused perspective, etc. And, you know, and you perceive it as a pilot and all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, but on the other side of things, the perspective of people being abused,
right.
people being victimized, and not stopping it is like, it's cascading to so many people. It's hurting so many people. And so the idea of not acting and like at least checking it out, you know, is kind of like, to me, I'm like, you know, no, I don't think that it's as simple as just a pile on. You know what I mean? Especially if you're talking about Ray and if you're talking about charisma.
Sure.
Because when they spoke up, the two of them, they had no idea if anyone was going to support them, and they both did it assuming they were going to lose their careers like everyone had previously.
So I don't know if I've ever really made it clear, because I've been doing this for over a year now, and I've been wildly unpopular up until recently. That one video, I had absolutely zero intentions of deceiving anybody for the purpose of generating attention. All I really wanted to do in the very beginning was solicit other people's opinions and have a conversation, which I am terribly thrilled that you stepped up to do. I had one other person do it. He was an acquaintance from a previous employer. Tragically, we were, for the most part, agreeing on everything with very little to no disagreement. And I was like, and then he had a kid. And as soon as this kid was born, he's like, yeah, I can't do this anymore. And it's like, you can, you just don't want to. But I digress. I'm terribly grateful that you got involved and were willing to talk to somebody, even if there was no chance in hell we would agree on everything or anything at all. Because that was kind of the whole point, was I don't need the media to tell me who my friends are. I don't need the media to tell me who I need to like or who I need to dislike. And I don't need the media or some political faction telling me who I can talk to or interact with. We might think completely differently and have opinions completely differently and vote differently and so on and so forth. And yet I value you as a human being. I value you as a productive member of society. And I think that was the biggest problem, was that was going on. And it's like, well, what if we do disagree? Can we not talk to each other?
Sure.
I don't have your background and experience on the particular topic we were focusing on, which is great. It's great to get involved with somebody who's like, well, hang on, I've got a significant investment in this topic.
Well, and that was another point that I brought up, is like, it is different when you have an investment in it versus when you don't, and you're just kind of like, yeah, whatever. It doesn't really affect me.
It was very difficult. It's been very difficult trying to find a process to overcome confirmation bias, because I like the content. And it's like, really? Of all people, Joss Whedon? You're going to throw him under the bus? Leave my content alone. There's plenty of other douchebags you could go after. And whether that's confirmation bias or not.
That's huge confirmation bias. Yeah,
no,
that's massive.
No.
And I'll be honest, like, he's not the first. I will say it's interesting, they're all dudes. But, you know, like, he's not the first creator that I've been, you know, and it's hard because it's like, you know, some of these people I get so invested in. I love their work so much. And like, but it's gotten to the point where I'm like, I don't even get shocked or surprised or disappointed anymore. I'm just like, oh, you
Here we
know,
go.
another fucking guy being a fucking asshole, whatever. And again, hashtag not all men.
Yeah.
You know,
On
like,
that note,
no, I know that, and that's the point that I think is important, is like when you see these things and you're like, well, I can't imagine somebody really doing these things that are so awful. It's like, it's because you don't, you affiliate with him because you're biologically and whatever, like more like him. Like you are more like him than you're like Cordelia, than you're like, you know what I mean? Like like it's much easier for you to identify with him. It's much easier for me to identify with her, you know? And so, but you are like, you probably just can't fathom doing that to somebody. Like you can't fathom saying to somebody, well, you're not keeping your baby, are you? You would never do that, I'm assuming.
no, no. That's a totally different conversation as far as my outlook on the sexes, which I'm more than happy to have with you. What I'd like to do.
But that in terms of like confirmation bias is like if you can't imagine doing it yourself and you identify with him, then it's hard to believe it happened.
I was relying on his previous, I don't want to say portrayal, but I was relying on stuff from like Nerd HQ and other interviews I've seen, and you know what other people have said in the past, and you know how he's been built up and propped up, and I guess I was, you know, I was believing in all the hype, and then when I was looking at all the naysaying and the timeliness of the name saying, it was basically contributing to my confirmation bias. What I would like to do is wrap this one up so I can get it published, and for our next conversation, maybe next weekend, let's talk about Supernatural.
Okay.
Specifically,
I love Supernatural.
Specifically the ending.
Okay.
I didn't like it.
Yeah, and I'm kind of mixed on it, so we probably won't have.
It sounds like we'll have a lot to discuss, though. It sounds like we'll have plenty to discuss. And it's a great outlet for us to nerd out on something other than modern day topics.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I like modern day topics too. I'm passionate about a lot of things.
If we can weave it in, if we can weave it in, we will.
I like it all. I'm like,
well, great. Whatever. And especially if we don't see eye to eye on it, but we can have a polite discussion, I'm all for it.
Sure.
And if we can loop other people in, great. So I'm going to go ahead and close this out. Thank you so much for getting involved. Thank you so much for having the conversation. I'm going to get this published, and you're awesome, Miss Sheila.
You too. My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Bye.